This lesson is called Angles and Parallel Lines. In this lesson, we're going to identify the special angle pairs when two lines are intersected by a transversal. And we're going to talk about the special types of angles and their measurements when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. So a transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines in a plane at different points. So here we have two lines and a transversal. T is the transversal because it intersects these two lines. And then you have 8 angles that are formed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 angles formed. The exterior angles are the ones that are outside of the two original lines. Those 4 angles there are outside of the two lines. Interiors are the ones that are inside the two lines. Same side interior or consecutive interior, well, they're interiors and they're on the same side. There's one pair. There's another pair. Alternate exterior, they're outside of the lines on opposite corners. Alternate exteriors are on opposite corners. There's one pair, and there's another pair. Alternate interior are inside the lines on opposite corners. There's a pair of alternate interiors, and there's a pair of alternate interiors. Corresponding angles are in the same position. If you look at each of these sets of 4, top left, those are corresponding. Top right, corresponding. Bottom right, corresponding. Bottom left, corresponding. So there's 4 pairs of corresponding angles. So let's talk about the different types of angles here. Remember, vertical angles are 2 angles that are opposite angles, and they are congruent. Angles 1 and 4 are vertical. 2 and 3, 5 and 8, 7 and 6. Remember, vertical angles make the bow tie. They look like a bow tie there for a 2 and 3. And they are congruent, so each pair is congruent. We also have linear pairs. And linear pairs are supplementary angles that form a line. You've got a line here, and 2 angles that form that line are supplementary angles. Those are a linear pair. They add up to 180. So 1 and 2 are a linear pair. 1 and 3, 3 and 4, 2 and 4. Also 5 and 6, 5 and 7, 7 and 8, 6 and 8. All of those pairs are linear pairs, and they are supplementary, so they do add up to equal 180. Now, what if the 2 lines are parallel? If 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then some angles are congruent and some angles are supplementary. The pairs that are congruent are corresponding, alternate interior, and alternate exterior. The pairs that are supplementary are the same side consecutive interior or the same side consecutive exterior. Even another way to look at this is when parallel lines are cut by a transversal. Just remember, all of the acute angles will be equal. All of the obtuse angles will be equal. And an acute plus an obtuse will equal 180. So acutes equal each other, obtuses equal each other, and one of each adds up to 180. But specifically, corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interiors are congruent, alternate exteriors are congruent, consecutive interiors supplementary, and consecutive exteriors are supplementary. So corresponding angles. If we do this drawing and number them, the corresponding angle pairs, they occupy corresponding positions like 1 and 5, 3 and 7, 2 and 6, 4 and 8. And they are congruent. Each pair is congruent. The consecutive angles, if you have consecutive interior angles, 3 and 5, and 4 and 6. And remember, those are supplementary, so those measures add up to equal 180. You also have the consecutive exterior angles, like 1 and 7, and 2 and 8. Those are also supplementary, so they add up to 180. And notice in each pair, you have one acute, one obtuse, one acute, one obtuse. When parallel lines are cut by a transversal, an acute plus an obtuse equals 180. What about the alternate angles? The alternate interior angles, like 3 and 6, 4 and 5, they're on opposite corners between the two lines. Those are congruent, so make those pairs congruent. 3 and 6 are both acute. 4 and 5 are both obtuse. Acutes are equal. Obtuses are equal. What about alternate exterior angles? Outside of the two lines, opposite corners, like 2 and 7 or 1 and 8. And those are also congruent. Angle 1 and angle 8 are both obtuse. They're congruent. Angle 7 and angle 2 are both acute. They're congruent. So when you have parallel lines cut by a transversal, you don't need to be given much information to find all of the other angle measures in the picture. So here we have that line AB is parallel to line CD. So I can draw my arrows there. And line S is parallel to line T. So I'll put a double arrow on these because they're parallel to each other, but they're not parallel to the first set of lines. Two sets of parallel lines now. That means all 16 of these angles work together. If the measure of angle 1 is 100, let's label that in the picture. Angle 1 is obtuse, it's 100. I can now say that every single obtuse angle is 100 degrees. I'll break it down a little bit though. Angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. They're congruent, so that's the same. Angle 5 and angle 4 are consecutive interiors. They add up to 180. 100 plus 80 is 180. 4 and 6 are alternate interior, so they're the same. 6 and 8 are vertical angles, so they're the same. 8 and 2 are alternate exterior angles, so they're the same. 2 and 10 are corresponding angles, so they're the same. I'm bouncing around a little bit here. 10 and 9 make a linear pair. There's a line right there. A linear pair is 180. I can go ahead and fill in the rest. Every obtuse angle will be 100 and every acute angle will be 80. And you can fill in the blanks on your paper according to these values. When parallel lines are cut by a transversal, acutes are equal, obtuses are equal, and one of each adds up to 180. Got ahead of myself there. Okay, if line AB is parallel to line CD and S is parallel to T, let's find X if the measure of angle 3 is 4x plus 6 and the measure of angle 11 is 126. Well, I can see in the picture here that angle 3 is in the bottom right and angle 11 is in the bottom right. They're corresponding angles and they're congruent. I could also say they're both obtuse, so they're congruent. Either way, they're congruent, so their measures are equal. So the measure of angle 3, which is 4x plus 6, equals the measure of angle 11, which is 126. And I can solve for x. Subtract 6, 4x equals 120, and divide by 4, so x is 30. And x is what I was looking for. So when you have parallel lines cut by a transversal, and here I have two sets of parallel lines, so all 16 angles work together. Acutes are equal, obtuses are equal, and one of each adds up to 180. How about if they give us the measure of angle 1 is 100 and the measure of angle 8 is 2x plus 10? These two angles are outside of the two lines and they're on the same side of the transversal. These are same side exteriors, which add up to 180. I can also see that angle 1 is obtuse and angle 8 is acute. Acute plus obtuse also adds up to 180. So let's find x here. 1 plus the other equals 180. And solve. 100 plus 10 is 110. Subtract 110 and divide by 2. X is 35. An acute plus an obtuse adds up to 180 when the lines are parallel. For this last question, the value of y is what we're looking for. If the measure of angle 11 is 3y minus 5 and the measure of angle 16 is 2y plus 20. If you look at these angles, they don't make any special pair. However, I can see right off that angle 11 is obtuse and angle 16 is acute. So it looks like we're going to add these up to equal 180. But I can make them a special pair. If I look here, 16 and 14 are vertical angles. And now if I compare 11 with 14, those are consecutive interior angles, which are still supplementary. So either way, they add up to 180. So let's substitute in and find this one out. So 3y minus 5 plus 2y plus 20 equals 180. Combine your like terms. 3y plus 2y is 5y. Negative 5 plus 20 is 15. Subtract the 15 from each side. And divide both sides by 5. And y is 33. So even though those didn't make a special angle pair, You can use your special angle pairs to sort of move around and get two angles that do work together. The vertical angles allowed us to do that. Or if you just happen to notice one acute, one obtuse, those add up to 180. So just remember, when parallel lines are cut by a transversal, acutes are the same, obtuses are the same, and one of each adds up to 180. Also remember that corresponding angles are congruent, alternate interior angles are congruent, and alternate exterior angles are congruent. And remember that consecutive interior angles are supplementary. So make sure you set your equations up properly and solve.